So before we start, there's a demo that's going to take the entire demo, and I've only ever done it once before, and not to bar people. So we're going to talk about acids a little bit later, probably a lot later in the session. And like one of the things I've always said, Don and I have always said, is that you can't really measure acids. It's difficult to measure acids at a bar. So you just kind of have to look it up on the internet. Well, it turns out you actually can measure acids with relatively cheap, simple equipment. So I'm going to do a test. Don has made an acid blend that I don't know the percentage of. Now, I know you probably think I'm a cheater and a liar. But,
he is.
But Don has not told me how much acid it is. What I'm going to do is try to determine what the percentage of acid of that is by the end of our session using nothing more than a like $8 Amazon scale. All right? All right, so let's start with that because it takes a long time. So the first thing you want is, these scales only do about 200 grams, so you're going to need a piece of paper too. So you have to keep everything as light as possible. You want to try to get the most product to measure that you can, while at the same time not maxing out your scale. So start your scale on 0, right? And let's see here. That's 58 grams. Now see what I have? I have a quart container with a lid and a little 8-ounce guy. I know that some of you people in California, other places, don't have quart containers. I don't really know why that's the case, but I'm told. So anyway, so then I'm going to want to get about 25 grams of baking soda in here. This is just plain old baking soda. It doesn't matter how good it is, frankly. None of it matters. All right, so now my rig is at 73.53. I'll go a little more. You don't want to have too little. All right, my rig is at 70. I'm going to go a little more. Really, you don't want too little. That's the trick. All right. All right. 80. I'm going to write down this number exactly. When I say exactly, as many digits as you have on a scale. At home, I have a scale with 3 digits, but whatever. I can't carry that around, and it costs $100 and not $8. All right, so this is, 8.2, 80.20. Write the 0 down. So that's the number, 80.20. That's how much my rig weighs. Now, the next thing you better write that number down. And remember to include your stir stick. Now I'm going to get Don's magic mix. Don, do you verify that you have not told me?
I have not told him what this is.
Okay. You zero it out.
You zero it out.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I have exactly 100. Oh. You want to be exact here, people. 116.96. You're going to weigh, sorry, this is so intensely boring, but this is the way life works in the real world. So now I have everything together. You're going to weigh it one last time with everything, okay? Zero it out. 0. Now weigh the entire rig together. So it's important that this entire thing not weigh more than your scale can tolerate. 197.20.
Okay, hold on for 1 second. For folks who are joining us late, we're going to just catch up what we're doing here. In the past, we've always said that it is very difficult, if not near impossible, to check the acidity of products in a bar. So we've just said, we can check the bricks, you can buy a refractometer, but there isn't a cheap tool to check bricks or check acidity in a bar. So this is a new technique that Dave's come up with where he's going to try to figure out the mystery acidity that I've created. So I have made a mixture of citric acid and water. He doesn't know exactly what the percentage is, and he's using baking soda and the mix I have along with a stir stick and then just some containers here. So the exact how to do do this, you can watch the go back and watch this from the beginning.
Yeah.
But we are weighing this exactly, and we are measuring out what this is to try to figure out what the mystery acid is in here.
The
So
two numbers you really need are the exact weight of the acid mix that you're trying to test, right? And this works on fruit juices. I've done it on fruit juices, right? You need that exact weight, and you need the exact weight of the entire rig, including your stir stick. You're going to need this lid because you don't want it to evaporate, and the baking soda. And the trick is to use excess baking soda, and also don't let it overflow, okay? Sometimes things are foaming. So you dump all of the baking soda, all of it, and it's going to foam up. That's the acid. That's the acid reacting with the baking soda, which is a base. Just like, you know, when you were a kid doing everyone's done the baking soda volcanoes. Who's gone to school in America? If you've gone to school in America, you probably made a baking soda volcano, right?
So
Now,
this was about 80 grams of baking soda with about 100 grams,
no, it was like 30.
or no, 30 grams of baking
20
soda.
or 30. I hopefully added enough. The only time this goes wrong is if I didn't add enough baking soda, and if that's the case and I have to go do, then, you know, my life is bad. But hopefully I added enough baking soda. It depends on the percentage of acid that he added. I really don't know. Now here's the trick. You're going to let this sit. You're going to put this lid on here so it doesn't evaporate. Don't close it too much. Leave everything together, and we're actually going to weigh how much carbon dioxide, how much of that gas was made, and that's going to let us calculate the acidity. So we're going to come back in there in like an hour and a half. All right?
Sounds good.
Now, back to our normal course of events. So this is supposed to be a session about clarification, and we're going to do clarification, but we're also going to do acidity. Yeah? Probably won't have time to do sugar. Anyway. So one of the questions everyone asks, well, first of all, like, why clarify, right? Like, why should you clarify things? Well, there are three main, well, how do I say three? There's more than three. Anyway, some of the main reasons to clarify are, one, you're going to carbonate. So we're going to carbonate stuff later. We're going to use this rig, and we're going to carbonate. And if you don't clarify something before you carbonate, and by the way, you can see over here, like this is partially clarified. It's pretty clear. That's pretty clear. That's good enough. You can see all the stuff that's settled at the bottom here. Like all of that, if it gets into your drink, when you carbonate, forms what's called a nucleation site. So if you've ever squeezed a lime into a drink and it foams everywhere, or
Champagne cocktail.
One of those things, especially like, I'm not going to name them, but like it's like a block from here where they pour like real soupy, like white peach puree into a flute and then dump like a little bit of Prosecco. It's like so much puree and then like a little bit of Prosecco. I'm not going to say who it is, but anyway, so like that cocktail is a nucleation nightmare. It might as well not even be carbonated. And by the way, that has a use. So like if you're making like a Ramos, right? So are you guys seltzer before the shake?
No.
No?
I'm a before the shake.
Before the shake. I'm also before the shake. I used to not be a before the shake because the purpose of the you guys know what a Ramos is? Don't make them. Whatever. I don't like the flour water.
A Ramos Gin Fizz.
Yeah. Well, I don't even remember the spec because I try never to make it. So I don't remember the spec. But it's a creamy drink that you're supposed to sit there and shake it for a billion years and pour it out. But the point of the seltzer in that isn't actually to make the drink carbonated. The point of the seltzer is to add bubbles as you're shaking so that the thing gets frothier. It's literally there to decarbonate the seltzer water and turn them into frothy bubbles. It's a foaming agent in the drink and not, in fact, a carbonation trick.
Yes, I don't put the seltzer in the tin in the traditional old school way. I do it in the glass. So I decarbonate in the glass to create the head.
In any event, that drink is a foam nightmare. It decarbonates the stuff almost instantly because of what's called nucleation sites, which I talked about a little bit. But I want you to think about this. When you have a glass that is, we don't have the slides because that's not what we're doing, but if you have a glass that's perfectly clean, and when I say perfectly clean, I mean you dump in like sulfuric acid, sodium dichromate solution into it, which I was talking about this the last time we were together. Like when I was in high school, you could still do that stuff. You cannot do that stuff anymore. You cannot use that stuff anymore.
We love the planet now. We didn't back then.
We totally didn't. We didn't love anybody or anything back then, except for sodium dichromate, sulfuric acid cleaning solution. That we loved.
We love the clean glass.
Yeah, because you would pour it into the glass and it would eat any organic stuff on the outside. So little bits of paper towel, little bits of whatever you had, it would eat it. And after you rinsed it with, distilled or deionized water, and poured it down the drain, which is evil.
Don't do that.
Don't do it. When you pour water into that glass and turn it upside down, So like if you take a normal glass and, I'm not like trying to insult anyone's glass cleaning techniques because you can't, it's not possible, right? But if you take a normal glass and dump it, right, you're going to see dots. You see these dots here? Little dots. And those dots form in places where there are nucleation sites at the glass. And that, in fact, is nucleation sites on the glass, and it's nucleation sites in your drink that cause bubbles to form at all. If there are no nucleation sites, if you have very pure water, you've taken all of the air out of it, all the gas, and it's just carbon dioxide and water, and your glass is what's called analytically clean, like I told you I used to do with that fancy solution, you will see no bubbles at all. At all. And then, like Coke Mentos, if you drop a sugar crystal or something in there that has a very big surface area, that is a place where bubbles can form. So bubbles don't actually want to form unless you give them a place to form. And clarification removes the places where bubbles can form. So if you want your drink to stay carbonated and not to foam up, like it's going to foam less when you pour it, and it's going to stay more carbonated the longer it sits. If you want that to happen, clarification. Yeah?
Yeah. So to clarify, if I can, bubbles once you have something carbonated and it's cold, so it's not at room temperature and it's just going to come out of solution, like if you took a warm beer, if you took a highly carbonated drink and you had it just in the bottle and you very carefully open the top, you'll notice that you'll have some bubbles come off, but for the most part, it'll just stay carbonated. And really, you lose the bubbles once you start pouring it out. And you'll notice that you lose it immediately as soon as you start pouring it into the glass. You lose it even more if you start pouring it over ice. So the more things that this carbonated liquid comes in contact with, those are places where the bubble can form. And with each bubble, the surface of that first tiny bubble becomes even more places where bubbles can form. So it's exponentially growing. If you look at, soda in a glass and you see it, all the bubbles getting bigger and bigger, that's exactly what's happening. Each of those bubbles becomes a nucleation site into itself, and it is creating more bubbles.
And when we get to carbonation, we'll talk a little bit more about the different things that cause foaming other than just clarification. Because there's some other things Don alluded to, like how cold it is, what the pressure is, the actual composition of the drink, et cetera, et cetera. Like we're going to carbonate Averna, and even though like nothing pleases me more than to carbonate, like, are you one of those people who says Amari instead of Amaras?
It's multiples or singular.
Wait. Right. So different Amar-Os, you call them Amari?
Oh, I use that as the plural.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, American, dummy. So I typically say Amaros, but I should say Amari?
Yes.
All right, so anyway, I like to carbonate Amari. I love it, but they tend to have other things in them that also cause a lot of foaming. Typically herbs, like especially barks, things that are high in what's called saponins and other surface active things, can make things foam even when they're clarified. Pineapple juice clarifies foams even when it's clarified. The worst is cucumber. Oh my God, cucumber. If you ever make a carbonated Pimm's and you put carbonated cucumber juice in, let's say for somebody's birthday when you were running a bar, like, God bless you. God bless you. But we'll figure out we'll tell you ways to get around that. Okay, so carbonation, which we're going to deal with later, is one reason to clarify. Another reason to clarify is making stirred drinks. So there are stirred drinks that are cloudy and goopy. I just think that they don't look as good. I prefer clear stirred drinks. Also, it's the mouthfeel issues, not just the look, it's the viscosity in the mouth. I don't want pulp in my mouth most of the time, when I'm making my stir. If you want a pulpy stirred drink, God bless. Right?
Some people like pulpy orange juice, but once again, to clarify.
Yeah.
Dave,
Yeah.
when you say that you like a stirred drink that is clear, this is not to say that just because it is clear, therefore it should be stirred, nor does that make it a good stirred drink. Yeah. So first of all, you love a delicious drink.
Yes.
And if it is going to be stirred and it happens to look clear, bonus points for everybody around. But step one, delicious drink first. Just because you made a drink clear and you stirred it does not make it delicious. Always make a delicious drink.
One of these or something. Also, let's talk about clear versus no color, because this is something that comes up quite a bit. Clear?
Clear.
Clear. This is clear. And what clear means is you can read through it, right? So this just happens to be dark, right? But if you were to put it in here, you'll notice that it is 100% clear. There is no cloudiness in this at all. So you need to separate in your mind the difference between clarification, which was removing things that are cloudy, and decolorization, decolorizing,
Transparentizing.
or like, well, no, because remember, if it's clear, it's transparent. So it's got to be, so if you want to take the color away from something, you have two options. You can filter the heck out of it. That's how they do it with rum, with charcoal. It's actually stripping the color out of it. Or you can distill it again. That's the other way to do it. But really, or you can shift the pH so, in some things you can shift the pH so radically that the color disappears. It's also then basically poisonous. So it's not really an option for cocktails. So remember to keep in your mind the difference between colorless and clear. I have a lot of people that want, for some reason, things to be colorless. It doesn't really make sense to me.
People like things that are, people grew up with Crystal Pepsi. They thought that it was a good thing, maybe.
Well, when you're using flavoring systems, you can do almost anything you want. When you're using kind of like that's so like if you're making your own tonic syrups, you're using probably bark because it's very difficult to buy the quinine, and so it's very hard to get those to be colorless.
All you need is money.
Money, I believe we talked about this last time. As Cyndi Lauper says, money changes everything.
And the willingness to hurt people.
Yes, that also works. Okay, so clarification for stirred drinks. Another thing is for something like that you want to remain stable over time. Clarification doesn't actually make things more stable, but it's a good first step if you're going to make a cordial, because most cordials, you want them to be clear. You can make a cloudy cordial, but they kind of make me sad. What do you think?
If you're going to go through the effort of making it, you might as well make it clear.
Right, and that's the way to stabilize it. So I don't believe that clarification actually stabilizes ingredients. I think it just...
Although for the people who love pulp, if you make the next pulpy Rose's Lime, maybe that someone out there wants that.
Yeah, remember...
Probably not.
Remember, by the way, if you're not on the cordial train yet, get on the cordial train. It's a great way. To me, like, that's an actual, like, sustainable thing to do with your juice when you're done with it, is to turn your old lime juice or lemon juice into cordial, right? So the better you are at judging your pars for the night and how much lime and lemon, the less you're going to have left over. But the stuff that's left over, that you can leave in your walk-in for weeks until you make a cordial out of it, because, like, once it's a couple of days old, there's so much acid in the lime that it's not going to physically spoil. Like, nothing's going to, in a short period of time, nothing's going to grow in it that's going to physically spoil. And then once you cordialize it, which basically you just clarify it and then boil it with an equal weight of sugar and some peel, and then you have to add a little bit of acid back, as we'll talk later. Now that thing is stable for years, literally years. And so it's good. And so we actually had so much, so Don and I had a bar called Existing Conditions. The conditions no longer exist. But we had so much cordial there that we were considering giving it away as like a party favor to guests and stuff, just because you end up with a lot of cordial. Okay. What other reasons to clarify? So another thing is there's a whole technique that, so before I talk about more like why to clarify, because we've talked about that enough, how to clarify. That's another issue. So originally, way back in the day, all this clarification thing started, well, for me, clarification started because I wanted to make gin and tonics. And in order to make a gin and tonic, you have to get rid of the nucleation sites. And at the time, there was no way to clarify lime juice. Like, there was no chef or bartender approved clarification technique for lime juice. So my first attempt was to use a piece of equipment called a rotary evaporator, and I distilled fresh lime juice. But when you distill it, remember, it's now colorless and clear.
And cooked.
No, rotovap is... I use a rotovap. Come on, man. Come on! So rotary evaporator is a vacuum still that allows you to distill at room temperature. And anyway, so like I was doing, and then I had to look up the acid base for what are the acids and sugars in lime, and then I would add that back, and then I would get this clear. But it's a pain in the ass. No one wants to do it. It sucks to do it.
No one can afford it.
No one can afford it. It's terrible. So like, it started my quest for lime juice. A couple years after that, Heston Blumenthal is a chef in England, discovered that if you take gelatin stock and you put it in the freezer and you thaw it over cheesecloth, the stuff that thaws comes out clear, right? And so that was the beginning of gelatin clarification. And then my brother-in-law, Wiley, over here was like, well, if it works on chicken stock, veal stock, He doesn't talk like that. If it works that way, maybe I could like add gelatin to carrot juice and get it to clarify too. And so he did, and it worked. So that's the gelatin clarification boom. Everyone was doing freeze thaw, and that was the only way to clarify. The problem with it is that it takes like a day and a half to freeze it solid and then let it thaw out again. And so it works really well for things like grapefruit juice. In fact, if you want a non-bitter grapefruit juice, right, freeze thaw clarification is the best debittering technique to get like large amounts of grapefruit with minimal bitterness. Then I think it was someone in Chicago, maybe someone on Grant Akitz's team, discovered that you could use agar instead, but still for freeze thaw. And that's better because it's vegetarian. Then I discovered that you could like set it, and instead of freezing it, just break it with a whisk and put it through a cheesecloth. And then that was the state of the art for the long time. And then I discovered centrifuges, which is mainly what we're going to talk about today. So I wouldn't recommend freeze thaw unless you have a lot of space. If someone wants to, in the book, I have a book called Liquid Intelligence. In that book, I tell you how to do freeze thaw and what the pitfalls are, but I'm not even going to bother talking about it because I've run 2 bars since then, and I have not freeze thawed once. Other than to write the book, I have not freeze thaw clarified in like 12 years, right? Because why would I? Why would I do that? Instead, I use a centrifuge. Now, if you're not going to buy a centrifuge, the other technique that I use is called rack, right? And just means your yield is low. We're going to rack in a minute. Okay, so let's do a simple clarification, one that can't actually be done either by racking or by freeze thawing. Another way you can, so there's racking and there's also filtration, which Don and I will talk about. I hate filtration. Don likes filtration. I hate filtration, but anyway.
Filtration is the poor man's way of clarifying. If you can't afford equipment, then you got to do what you got to do.
All right, so the first actual clarification, can you see the blender through all of my stuff in front or no?
There's a blender here.
Yeah. So I have in here 500 milliliters of Wild Turkey 101. We use the bourbon, not the rye. I think the bourbon goes nicely with the dates.
I think so.
Yeah. And this is a technique that I apologize in advance. It's called Justino, based on a guy whose name was Justin, not Justino, whatever. Anyway, so it's
the moral of the story is when you name things, think about the legacy of what you're creating, because if you're successful, you're going to have to explain this to people for the rest of your life, and you're going to have to explain a dumb joke for the rest of your life.
Yeah, it wasn't even my joke. One of my interns, who's now a famous chef, it was his joke. Anyway.
Question.
Yes.
So the question is, what about off-flavor some oxidation in longer stored citrus, just to try overpower it with essential oils? So this, I assume this is a super juice question or a cordial question. So if you are making a cordial, which is not a long stored juice, this is when you took a perhaps long stored juice and then you clarify it and you cook it with sugar. So it's more closer to making a jam or a jelly than it is to a regular juice off the shelf. So you're not really thinking about it. You've transformed the flavor. It's beyond oxidizing. You've cooked it. So it doesn't matter. In terms of super juice, which is a fad on the internets these days, where you're really essentially making just a very lime peel juice, it is a way of making a new thing. It is not a way of making a better thing. If you're trying to make lime juice, turns out the best juice is lime juice, not super juice.
Right.
If you want a super juice, if you love the flavor of super juice all day. But don't think that it is lime juice or another fresh juice. It is a different product.
I've thought a lot about this problem, a lot about this problem. So at first I was like, for me, the issue is that at the money, look, I don't like anything that seems like I'm selling somebody water for juice, right? At the money that they're paying. Like usually at a place that I'm running, at that level of money, I don't think they expect me to sell them water for juice. Okay? So I consider it to be kind of fundamentally different from acid adjusting, which we're going to do in a minute. Now, the people who are pro super juice, and I'm going to go through it for those of you that, I don't know, haven't been on the internet. So it derives
God bless you.
Yeah, it derives from the idea of an oleosaccharum. So in an oleosaccharum, you're taking the peel of a citrus, right, whatever citrus you want, and you're using granulated sugar as an abrasive, like Comet, when you're scrubbing do people still use Comet? Yeah, as like an abrasive. And so that's why you don't want to add any liquid to your peels when you're making an oleo. It's just peels and sugar, because if you add liquid, right, you're reducing the abrasive power of the sugar. The sugar is an abrasive. Then after it breaks up, it will get a little bit soupy because it's going to suck some liquid. There is some liquid in the peel, right? But what you're really trying to do is liberate all of the oils, right? Then you add juice to that in an oleo. You add juice to that, and you have now oleosaccharum. And oleosaccharum does indeed last longer than citrus juice because, as the question person asked or mentioned, right, you're covering up what's going wrong with the citrus juice with the flavor of peel. You agree so far? Okay. So what super juice is instead of using sugar as an abrasive, what if we use acid as an abrasive? But the problem about using acid as an abrasive is that now, if you want to use it as an acid in a shake and drink, you can't, if you add water to it, it's too freaking sour, right? So you can no longer, if you add straight, like let's say you do lemon juice. If you add straight lemon juice, instead of it now being 6% acidity, which is roughly what lemon juice is, it's now going to be like 10% acidity or better, right? That's too tart. So in order to kind of bring it back into normal human land, you add water to it. And that's kind of my issue with it. And it will be, quote unquote, more stable. The actual lemon juice in it won't be more stable, but you won't be able to tell it's gone off as much because of the peel covering up the flavor. And that's what I think, Don, you were saying before. Now, here comes the interesting part. So I was thinking about this, and I was getting all bent and bent out of shape, and I was like, wait, because people are like, I really like it. And so when someone says they really like it, you have to take it seriously, right? And so I think people just like the flavor of peel. So I have been testing a lot just using juicers that put a preposterous amount of peel in. So I've been using vertical auger slow juicers to do, so you just put, I cut them in half, but you could probably put them in whole if they were small, like whole lemons, whole limes into the vertical auger juicer. Now, a Breville, like a centrifugal juicer, shreds it. You're going to get too much of the white, the nastiness, and it also is going to throw too much pulp into your juice, right? I haven't tried it on a Champion because my Champions got stolen from the last bar we operated. Okay.
You know who has it.
I had two. Both of those Champions were my personal champions. Both of them. I had two personal Champion juicers. You know how many Champion juicers I own now? This many Champion juicers. But a Champion juicer is a masticating juicer, and I don't think it's going to be good for peely juice. I think it's going to shred the white too much. You could probably use a 2-ton or 4-ton press. I have one, but they really suck to use. They're really slow. They're awesome, but they're so slow. This vertical auger juicer does a great job, and I've tested it in different drinks, and it is a different product from lemon or lime juice, but a lot of people really, really like it. Lime juice is too bitter. So with lime juice, I would definitely cut it like maybe 1-to-1, the vertical auger juice and the lime juice, or even maybe 2 lime juice to 1 vertical auger juice. But the lemon is actually good straight.
So keep asking questions. We may have to postpone some of these questions maybe towards the end so we can get through the demo and actually talk about clarification. So okay. Dave has added dates to Wild Turkey Bourbon here into this blender. He's about to add...
enzyme, SPL. So I'm not going to measure it because I don't really care. But because the amount of enzyme, just don't add too much because it does have a kind of a fermented flavor, but that's fine. I'm going to add a little more just because I want it to work because it's on camera and you guys can't taste it anyway. Am I right? Can't taste it. So this technique, again, is called Husino, which is really stupid. When you're doing a dried fruit, so I like to do dried fruits with this when I can because they're just incredibly stable. So like things like some fruits with liquid like bananas, even though the proof drops quite a bit when you do this technique, some fruits are stable like bananas, but many fruits many fruits like strawberries are not, right? I'm just going to blend this. Hold a second. Oh, come on.
So for those of you who have never seen this technique, I'm going to step away here so you can not hear the blender so much. What the enzyme he added is basically like a biological set of scissors. They go into the fruit that's being pulped here, and it's going to cut a very specific set of molecules known as pectins. Pectins are the thing that you would normally add to a jam or jelly to give it the body and the texture. So in the case of a clarified product, you actually want to have no body. You do not want to have any of that pectin. So we are adding an enzyme that is going to cut the pectin, and by doing that, we're actually removing the little things that would keep the fruit pieces in suspension. So if you're looking at some of these things up front and you see that the fruit has settled out of it and it is mostly clear on top, I'm guessing at least one of those has pectin added to it, pectin X added to it. Yeah, so by cutting the pectin, which would normally keep the solid suspended, we're allowing it to drop out. And that's what we're trying to do to this in alcohol as well.
So this is the simplest clarification to do, but I think also the kind of most miraculous. So what I want to say about this, I'm going to pour it in here. You want to get the enzyme up to like room temperature or body temperature, so don't use it cold, right? It's best if you want to minimize evaporation of precious booze to let it sit covered until the temperature goes back down a little bit. Otherwise, you will flash off some when you're, can't see where I am. So this is, I didn't even mention it. So this is a centrifuge. This is a centrifuge that I build. It's a Spinzall. This is the new version of it. We'll talk more about that in a minute. So you can see, we have like here. So that is not a delicious looking drink, in my estimation. No, not a delicious looking drink. I should let it sit, let the enzyme work, but I'm just going to get it ready to go and we're going to spin it. So this is a good time to talk about the fact that clarification always changes the flavor. Clarification always changes the flavor of the product. Sometimes?
Always.
Always. Is that true? Yeah. I have never had a product that tastes the same clarified versus not clarified, and sometimes that works very well in a drink, and sometimes it doesn't. I really, really, really encourage everyone to stop thinking about things as being better or worse, but just being
Different.
Yeah. This is the old acid, right?
Yep, that's mystery acid.
Okay, so I'm going to load this in here, get it ready to run. I can even run it. So when you blend fruit and spirit, especially wooded spirit, what happens is that the fruit pulp, the pectins in the fruit pulp, tend to bind with, I think it's pectins, could also be hemicellulose. I've never done, I don't know. Someone has to test it. I don't know. But it binds with some of the wood and some of the other components. So what you get out is not the same thing as making a date syrup and then adding it to the spirit. Also, the alcohol pulls specific things out of the fruit that would be different. So both the fruit and the booze are changed by this technique.
You'll most drastically see this if you use a wooded spirit. So the banana Justino, so banana in rum in this process is something that we used to do at our bar, and Dave used to do at Booker and Dax. If you did this with dark rum versus with light rum, the product you would get out of it would be closer to that light rum to begin with, because a lot of those wood flavors would get stripped out with the banana. And the way to think about this is, how could it not change in the clarification when you've removed something? Even if all you've removed is the pulp, right? How is it that, if you took just regular orange juice that has pulp in it and you strained it off to non-pulpy orange juice, even that tastes different, right? So when you've removed even more of that pulp, all the particulates, of course it's going to taste more different. And in the case of something like this, where you have all these finer particles that could trap more things, even from the spirit itself, it's going to get an even more different product at the end. So,
Question about the
question, what was in the blender? Wild Turkey 101, Pectinex, and
Medjool dates, pitted medjool dates. I forgot to mention this. So good ratios, rules of thumb with dried fruits are about 5 to 1. So if you got 500, if you got a liter of booze, 200 grams of dates or figs or dried anything. The issue really with it is that if you add more, the sugar level is going to get too high, because that's about the sugar level that I get out of dried fruits that I like, is around that range. But also your yield starts to go down. So for those of you that have done clarification before, when we get to this, when this thing is done in 2 minutes and 50 seconds, I want to talk about how every kind of clarification is a little bit different. So dried fruits tend to form a very, very firm puck. And what that means is you can really, really increase your yields. And I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. Wetter fruits like bananas, I typically do at a 4 to 1 ratio. So 250 grams of banana to a liter of liquor, typically rum, typically aged, because that gets the most banana flavor. So that's kind of the sweet spot, is somewhere between 5 to 1 and 4 to 1. And some dried fruits are too, they they absorb too much of your liquor. Like apricots are a pain in the butt. Some mangoes, dried mangoes, are a pain in the butt. So a good technique that comes from Mike Hepaferi over at Thunderbolt LA is what they'll do is they'll pre-hydrate. So like this blew my mind when they told me. So like what they do over there is they had, I think it was a dried cherry drink, and the yield was bad, right? And they were doing it into rum, but they were doing a split-based rum. So what they did is they took, I think it was Ray and Neff, or something like a very, like, could have been Three Rivers, but I think it was Ray and Neff, something like very, like with a lot of high notes that they didn't want to spin out. And they overnight soaked the dried cherries in that to pre-hydrate them, right? Then they blended that into the aged rum that they were using, and you know, some version, I don't forget which version of Appleton's what it was, but some Appleton's version, and then spun that out. And so their yield went up, and they got the high note flavors out of the fruit into the Ray and Neff, and they mix the two together. So there's a lot of things you can do to kind of increase your yield and to kind of do fun things. My kind of sleight of hand with those things, and it makes a really kind of unique flavor, is to do dried fruit with a little bit of fresh fruit. So like we did something at Thunderbolt LA that I thought was really awesome. They went to the Santa Monica Farmers Market and they got these amazing peaches. And then we also bought, I think it was AL bought some dried peaches, nice quality dried peaches, California high acid peaches. And then blended the two together, so you get that sugar backbone and kind of that structure from the dried fruit, but a lot of those fresh notes that are lost in dried fruit from the fact that you've also added fresh fruit. So there's a lot of different ways to kind of skin this pony, but like, it's fun.
So to explain what's happening here, as we said here with these glasses where we've added some Pectinex and possibly other clarifying agents into juice, and you can see that the pulp has settled out. Once you have gotten the pectin out of the picture with this enzyme, and so the pectin is no longer holding things in suspension. Right now, as we sit here or stand here on planet Earth, we have gravity. We are being held against the floor of this planet by gravity. If I jump, I get pulled back down because of gravity. That same gravity, even though you don't really feel it necessarily, other than keeping you on the ground, is also pulling on all the little suspended particles that are in these glasses. So that gravity is slowly pulling down every particle, and without the pectin in the way to hold it up, the particle comes down and settles in the bottom of the glass. And that technique that Dave mentioned before, racking, a really easy way to do this is you could just pour off the top of this and you would get just that clear part on top and you'd leave behind the sediment on the bottom.
And we're going to do that in a minute. The problem with it is that your yields are typically low. So like at home, people are like, do I need a centrifuge at home? I'm like, nah, you can probably just rack it, right? But at a bar, if I had to throw away a bunch of product all the time, it gets pricey, you know what I mean? But in generally, what I do, if I'm going to do a huge quantity of something, is I will rack the top and then spin the bottom. Does that make sense? Because actually, this is kind of counterintuitive, but the more solids are in the rotor, actually the better it clarifies. Because I'll show you in a minute, but as it's spinning.
So what's happening is by spinning, imagine if you're holding a bucket of water and you just spin around in a circle in place. The water doesn't spill to the ground. It's being pushed outwards. That is what's happening in this rotor. By spinning very quickly, there are 3 fins inside that keep things in place as it's spinning, so instead of just the rotor turning by itself. And by spinning that liquid, all that gets pushed to the side as if you were holding a bucket. And theoretically, you could do this with a bucket. It'd be very impractical, but you could.
I tried it.
Very impractical, but
It sucks.
don't do it. But if you imagine spinning this bucket, it's being pushed to the side. So imagine this is like the astronauts that are training to go to the moon. They're, in that machine that spins them around. What are they doing? They are simulating increasing gravity. So instead of, saying we're going to increase gravity by going to another planet or being in a rocket that's going quickly, we are spinning this very quickly as if we're holding a bucket and spinning very quickly, and that is creating the force, just like gravity would, that will pull these particles in one direction, in this case against the outside edge of the rotor, and we are concentrating that solid part into a puck, as Dave calls it, and compressing that down so that once it slows down spinning and everything wants to settle back, the solid stays stuck against the side, only the liquid comes down, and then you can pour the liquid off. And you can see here that Dave has done this.
It's good practice to do this because, strangely, if there's any air left in the product, it'll float. So there's always kind of floaties, and so it's good practice to pour through a McGill strainer. Now, normally, if you use something like bananas that is not dark, the product actually gets clearer. And certain like blackstrap rums, they go clear when you spin them with fruit because the fruit grabs all of the caramel color. In this case, the dates are dark enough that it actually came out a little bit darker, right? But
So in Dave's right hand, you can see that was just straight spirit, and on the left side was once he had run it with the date. And if we can get the camera over, you can see inside the rotor, here is all of the pulp from the dates that got left behind.
But let's taste, huh? So
Straight spirit.
straight spirit, right? Tastes like straight spirit. I've measured the proof loss on this, so like I have to look it up, but you lose a couple of percent, not that much, right? In fact, notice I only spun it for 4 minutes, and the longer you spin something, the more evaporates. So you want to do the shortest spin possible.
Also, if you saw, Dave had the this plugged in on top, even though he wasn't pumping anything into it. If you want to keep it closed, then ideally also plug a rubber stopper or a cork in this end so that you have less evaporation. Because it is moving, you're going to have increased evaporation compared to if you just let it sit out in the world.
Now, in your own words, get in the middle. So in your own words, like not just the fact that it's obviously sweeter, like what do you think happened to the spirit?
I think that the viscosity has increased a bit. There are now, of course, very present notes of the dates, and there's like that slight lingering, not oily, but almost pectiny feel that's come through the first straining.
And you know, in general, I also think, and maybe not this time, but in general, I think that like the wood is softened a little bit. You know, here, can you get a look at this? Notice how that when the puck is formed, the see how there's like basically two levels. There's that kind of gooey layer of the puck, and then there's that kind of more kind of crystal layer. So whether or not you can do what I'm about to do totally depends on the actual clarification that you're doing. But I highly recommend from a money perspective in your bar that you don't throw away the puck directly into the trash until you at least try to see whether or not you have what I like to call a hard settling or a self-filtering puck. So the puck in date, watch me be a fool. Last night I did this. I did 5 liters of this last night for an event today. Later on this worked like a charm. So watch it fail on me now, because that's the way my life tends to work. So if you're doing the same product over and over and over again, there's no need to clean out the rotor, right? So I should say, like, when you're spinning something in an old school centrifuge, you need to balance it. Here, you just fill it up to the line, and these fins kind of balance it for you. And so I just keep adding product to it, and I don't really clean it out that much until it kind of fills up. And this feeder, Don alluded to it, is so that if you want to do it, you can do what's called continuous centrifuging, where you keep feeding liquid in and clear liquid sprays out. It's never quite as clear as doing it the way that I'm doing it now, which is called batch mode. But you can drastically increase your yield by putting, you want to talk about nut milk bags while I do this, Don, since you are the nut milk fiend?
That's definitely not true. I'm anti-nut milk because I love milk so much.
Oh, but I mean like the bags.
Yes. So I like using what is commonly known as the super bag because it's just the cheap thing that everyone can buy, and you have pretty much infinite reusability with it. And by using something that has such a small pore, so most super bags you're going to buy are about 100 micron in the pore size. You can use it to filter almost anything. Most people these days tend to use it for doing things like milk punches. You could just put your juice through it if you wanted a super clear a juice. It is about twice as small, twice as filtering as a standard paper coffee filter. And unlike a paper coffee filter, you can't really squeeze that paper. With this bag, as you see Dave doing, you can give it quite a firm squeeze and really push out as much of the product as possible.
So I was able to get, and this is not, I mean, when you have a huge amount of puck, it's really self-filtering. Even with this small amount of puck, it's mostly self-filtering. So I would say it's not as clear as what we spun, but it's pretty good. And if you were to do, yesterday I did, it was 4.5 liters with 900 grams of dates. And so I had 900 grams of dates left, and because it had been sitting for a long time, like it started to self. So the way that filter bags work when you're clarifying is you need to build up a layer of filtration, right? So stuff is dripping out of it, and especially if you apply pressure early, it tends to be cloudy. Larger particles, they form an initial bed, and then smaller particles will kind of pack around it, and then those particles are in a molecular way sticky. And as this stuff filters through a fully formed bed, which is why when you're doing milk punch, you let it run through your bag until it runs clear, and then you run all that stuff again. Once it becomes a self-filtering thing, then you will get clarification as good as this, and you can get your yield up to basically unity, right? So you go from something where out of 4.5 liters, something where you lose almost 750 mils to the puck, you can get all the way back up to 4.5 liters. Now, of course, you're throwing away some of that alcohol with the date solids that you're throwing away, but your yield is much higher. So I very much encourage you to not throw away your pucks and to...
Yeah, and with something with a fresh fruit like a fresh banana, your yield will actually be more than 100% because you're getting some of the liquid from the banana, obviously.
Yeah. And there's also, right, there's super clear and there's clear enough, right?
It depends on the application. So for this, clear enough would not be used for carbonation. However, if you were to serve this, in this way that we did at the bar, we kind of use this in the form of like an old fashioned. So it has about the sugar level of an old fashioned. So you could just pour it over a rock and serve it like one. And if ideally you get it to the actual centrifuge clear and not the bag cleared, but it would work.
And when you let that one that's bag clear sit for a day or two, you can rack it off again. That's I shouldn't say that, but that's just the truth.
Or collect all of those, and then in the last run, after you've poured it off, then pour that back through, and then you can run it. So if you're doing this, especially for a bar program, and you'll keep a drink on the menu for months, this is something you can do to make sure that you're getting 100% of what you can get, not necessarily 100% of the actual product, if that is not possible.
Yeah. All right. So, and remember, what's nice about this technique, in my mind, is that it creates flavors that you couldn't otherwise create, and it's very different from making a date syrup. It just doesn't taste the same because you don't have that modification of the base spirit by the fruit. Okay? Okay. So that is done just with the enzyme Pectinex. Please don't tell me that your clarifications aren't working and then tell me that you didn't use Pectinex. I don't want to hear it.
Also, as Dave mentioned, that Pectinex works most well at body temperature. So if you're doing something like, let's say, a frozen strawberry, you blended the strawberry and it's still like smoothie temperature, the Pectinex is not going to be doing anything until that gets up to body temperature. Most enzymes, as they would exist naturally and not human created, they exist in your gut or other animals' guts because that is how organisms break food down so that we can get nutrition out of them. So Pectin-X would be a way that if you were to eat a fruit, and your body would break down the pectin. So they work at body temperature. Conversely, things that would kill you. So in terms of temperature, so too hot especially will also break down the enzyme. So if you were to buy Pectin-X in the heat of summer, and it was Amazon ground shipped to you very slowly over a week.
Let's say in New Orleans?
Let's say to New Orleans for a large event, and it sat in a warehouse in New Orleans for weeks in prep for your events, hypothetically, and not in a refrigerator, then that Pectin-X would be absolutely dead and would not work at all. So if you can, buy your Pectin-X from a reputable source. Buy it when you know it's going to be cold, or if you can get it shipped cold. If you buy it from a chemical warehouse, they will actually make you pay exorbitantly through the nose to have it shipped in a sealed container at temperature. So just understand that it is supposed to be kept cold.
By the way, I just have to say this, right? So Modernist Pantry, which is where we get all this stuff, they're my business partners for Centrifuge. So I'm not saying anything negative. However, at a bar, I don't know whether people have worked this out with them yet. We used to buy 25-liter pails of enzymes because 80% of our ingredients went through a fuge and had some form of enzyme in it. And it ended up costing too much. So they need to work out a deal for, they haven't done it yet, but I don't think you guys have approached them yet to get a better deal on 25-liter pails. because we used to buy 25-liter pails directly from the manufacturer, and it's hard to set up those contacts. So like maybe if we could work something out with them, it'd be advantageous, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, 25-liter pails is the way to go when you were doing as much as we did. Even at Booker and Dax, which was only 30-something seats, we bought it by the 25-liter pail. Of course, Modernist Pantry wasn't selling it at that point. Whatever.
It'll last you about 6 months.
Yeah, if you keep it well, yeah, anyway. But Modernist Pantry is doing a great service by making them in smaller increments, and they have to charge for that service.
Right.
So I don't wanna hear
You're
about
paying for the packaging, you're paying for the label, the shipping, the people
yeah.
pour it off.
Yeah, humans, they have to exist in Maine, you know what I mean? Okay, so now let's talk about, that was just enzyme. Remember, the enzyme, you can use Pectinex Ultra SPL, which is what everyone uses and what they buy. I actually tend to use, if I'm paying with my own money, Pectinex XXL. And the advantage it has is that it's cheaper by a lot, and it works just as well, if not better. The disadvantage is that the microorganism that, by the way, these are produced via fermentation with microorganisms, right? And this particular one, what they'll do is I believe it's an aspergillus, right? They'll just grow 8 billion aspergillus things in like miniature petri dishes, and they'll test them for various things. And they're like, oh, that one does this really well. And then they'll grow that one, and they'll isolate an enzyme from it. And that's what this is. It's a mixture maybe of a couple different aspergillus strains make it. The one that I use that's cheaper is genetically modified. It's GMO. And I don't care. How about that? You know what I mean? But a lot of people do. So if it matters to you, get the SPL.
Better living through science.
Yeah. Modernist Pantry only stocks the SPL because they don't want to stock two different ones. And since some people care about the GMO, they care about the GMO. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Now, yeah.
Keep going.
All right. So that's what enzyme can do. But enzymes often, so let me just say this. Let's say you know who Nathan Myhrvold is, people? Like the Microsoft guy who did the Modernist Cuisine book series with Chris Young and and Maxime, and then anyway, and then now with
World's Worst Patent Troll.
Now with Magoya, and they come out with a series of Modernist books, right? So he's a billionaire with a B, like several times over. So he can afford a very large, very powerful centrifuge.
And to sue everyone for products that he's not making just by owning the patents.
Yes. Yes. But so if you were to be able to own a centrifuge that could do, let's say, 40,000 times the force of gravity, 40,000, right? Then you could clarify lime juice directly without enzymes, without anything, right? But you need something that can do about 45,000 Gs. Now, this unit, benchtop units, they're in the several thousand G range, like 3,000, 4,000, Gs, right? That Gs meaning times the force of gravity. That's how much you're accelerating the increase in the force of gravity. If you want to do something like chicken stock, you need to go even higher. I don't remember what the number is, but I think it's like over 60,000 Gs to clarify chicken stock directly, or veal stock, I guess, right? Unless you are a patent troll, you cannot afford that centrifuge. It is large, it is super expensive, and you have to worry about them if you put them together wrong. It's real bad.
You don't want to trust your bar staff to run this when you're not there. It's definitely going to break.
They're huge. And I'm talking like even the centrifuges that I used to use at Booker and Dax, which were the 3-liter benchtop centrifuges that could do 4,000 times the force of gravity. Those units are like $8,000 to $10,000, right? And then when they break, you're done. You're toast, right? Because very few people could. I had to, but I would buy them used on the internet and fix them myself, right? So when one broke, I could shift another one in. But that's actually the reason that I started making the Spinzall, was because I wanted like a sub $1,000 small unit that was safe, that you could have like 3 or 4. That way, if one breaks, you can just use the other one, and you can put them away under a counter. You can move them over there, and they're inherently safe, and they don't need to be balanced. That's the reason I did this at all. Right.
For food safety purposes, I'm legally about. I need to say that if you're going to buy stuff from the internet, from laboratories, you don't know what they use these products for, do not use them for food purposes.
Well, the assumption is they've done something evil.
They've definitely done something evil. They've probably done something toxic. So unless you actually know what you're doing, don't buy former lab products to use for food production.
So, when you don't have a centrifuge, which I'm assuming none of you do, that can do 40,000 times the force of gravity, you need to use assistance. And the first piece of assistance is the enzyme, Pectinex Ultra SPL. And if you're doing something like apple juice, it works fine. In fact, some things clarify, like Granny Smith apple juice, what I call auto clarifies so well that you almost don't need to use enzyme on it, because
if you just leave it overnight in your fridge, it'll mostly clarify out.
Yeah.
And on the SPL note, a question that came in, we mentioned the temperature of the enzyme. You do not need to raise you definitely do not want to raise the entire container of enzyme up to room temperature before you use it. It makes no sense to raise the temperature of the tiny amount that you're going to raise to room temperature, because even by the measuring it, you're probably raising it to room temperature. Assuming the juice or product you're trying to clarify is at least at room temperature, it'll probably net out. I mean, if you're using equal parts enzyme and product, you've done something wrong. So if you're using the correct amount of enzyme, the amount you're putting into the product, if the product is room temperature, you'll be more than warm enough. If, like I said, you're doing something like frozen fruits and you're using a blender to puree it before you add the enzyme and it is still slushy, still cold, that's when you need to worry about the temperature. Usually when people are like, it's not clarifying, it's not because they are taking, cold lime juice. It's usually because they're taking a frozen puree product, whether they're blending it themselves or buying a puree and saying it's not clarifying.
Right. And usually time is your friend. The longer you can let stuff sit and work, like kind of the better off you are.
But if you've waited a long time and you've brought it to temperature and it's still not breaking, and we'll explain what that means in a second,
right,
then it is probably because the enzyme is dead, right, at which point you can try adding more enzyme.
So let's just look at like what good clarification looks like anyway. So like very viscous like purees, they tend never to break the way that these things over here on the counter break. So you're never going to see, you saw how clear that spun, but it's never going to look fantastic. I need to look at it with it's never going to look fantastic in the glass. Purees like strawberry puree, so the way that, some people like to make like cold pressed like juices from things like raspberries and strawberries, great if you have that capability, but like I tend to go straight from puree, and those you'll see almost like a puffy,
Like a crack.
yeah, and you'll look at it, and in between those cracks, you'll see that there is juice that is not the cloudy pulp, and that's what you're looking for. If you don't see that, odds are it's not going to clarify properly, no matter what. Yeah, that's odds are.
So as you see here in this juice example, it is settled out with a puree. It's not going to settle out completely, especially not in any normal time that you're going to wait for it. But when you look at that pureed part, you'll see a jagged crack, especially if you give it a slight bump. Don't shake it up to, put everything back in suspension. But if you, especially another word of best practice, put things into a round container, not into a square container. So when you pick something up, you can turn it and it's not going to make all the cloudiness go back up into the air. If you put something into a square container, the square edges are going to lift up all those cloudy particles on the bottom. So if you have a round container and you slightly rotate it, you'll see that break pretty clearly in the pureed product.
Okay, so now, Pectinex, the less powerful your centrifuge is, the less often Pectinex on its own is going to do what you need. And also, the more acidic your ingredient is, even with a larger centrifuge, you're going to need more help, because the enzyme starts to not work as well when you get down below about the acidity in a grapefruit, right? So grapefruit is on the edge. You can kind of do grapefruit on its own, but in general, you can't. So things that are like acidic, and actually with the Spinzall, on most things that they aren't like dates, I tend to add these two things called they're wine finding agents. Now, wine finding, for those of you that know, like you add products to wine, it settles out over time, and it causes like anything that's impurities to settle out. Or if you brew beer, you don't use the finding, but things will settle out to the bottom, and what you're left over with is clear. Now, any wine person will tell you that the different wine finding agents that they use have more or less stripping effect on flavor. Go back to the beginning of this if you joined later, whatever. I'm sorry, I apologize. But anytime you clarify, you're going to change flavor. Now, with Pectinex, you're not, this is the least amount of flavor change that's possible with clarification. The least damage to the flavor, because What you're really doing is breaking down pectin, which is flavorless, and hemicellulose, which is flavorless. And the only difference is going to be what flavors were in the pulp versus what flavors were in just the juice, right? Because remember, not everything is soluble. So you're getting stuff on your tongue that's not in the juice when you're actually eating the solids. Does it make sense? Did I explain that correctly? Oh, by the way, I didn't mention this. That puck that I think we already threw away, that date puck, tastes disgusting. I'm going to have you taste the puck. It's like all of the wood is in there. Not all the wood, some of the wood. Doesn't taste good, unpleasant. Pucks from just fruit tend to taste good, except for tomato. If you want to know how bitter tomato skins are, either just peel a bunch of tomatoes and eat just the skins, or spin it in a centrifuge and taste the skin side of the puck. It's nasty, right? Right? Not the best.
Very woody.
Very woody. Very woody.
Do not recommend.
Okay, so when something gets acidic, and then in general in here, I tend to use wine finding agents. Now, the ones that I use are a mixture of Spinzall, which is a suspended silica, and if you look at it, can you see it's slightly milky? You want it to be milky. If it's not milky, there's a problem. This does not need to be stored in the refrigerator. You can store it in the refrigerator. I like to store all my stuff together, so I store it in the refrigerator. Do not freeze it. If it freezes, it turns to sludge, it's ruined. Don't freeze it. Chitosan must be refrigerated. So the way that you can buy chitosan and Spinzall from homebrew shops, right? I highly recommend, though, I mean, not to plug them again, but I highly recommend you go to Modernist Pantry and get this version of chitosan because chitosan is the main cell wall component of fungi. It's also like the main structural component of like shrimp shells and like arthropod stuff. So all of the chitosan you're going to buy, with the exception of this one, it comes from shrimp shells, and it doesn't cause people with shrimp allergies to have a problem. I know because I don't have a shrimp allergy, but my good friend Harold McGee has a pretty severe shrimp allergy, and I've served him the stuff with his knowledge, and he was fine, right? So it's not going to cause that, but I like to try to be vegan with my drinks whenever I can be vegan with my drinks, and so I stay away from the shrimp-based stuff. The other advantage is that chitosan must be refrigerated because it's a hydrocolloid, and mold will grow in the chitosan, right? So when you buy it from Modernist Pantry, it comes conveniently as a powder. This is shelf stable for infinity, and you can just make what you need. And it's really easy. You mix it with water, and then it's not soluble in water until you add a little bit of regular distilled vinegar. Please don't use a fancy vinegar. Please don't put apple cider vinegar. Please, come on. You're not trying to add flavor, and it's just a little bit. Distilled, because distilled also has a more accurate acidity. Anyway, so you add a little bit, it instantly goes clear, and it's good to go. At that point, it needs to be stored in the fridge.
Everyone asks what the recipe for this is. It is on their website. It is on the packaging. Just look it up online.
I mean, it is my recipe, but yeah. For 500 mils of solution, add 400 mils of water to a blender. Turn the blender on low, medium speed to create a vortex. That's definitely my language. Add 5 grams chitosan powder to vortex. After chitosan is dispersed, add 100 milliliters of distilled vinegar, 5%. Again, my language. Blend until chitosan is completely dissolved. Boom. Okay.
If you ask him this when he's not holding the package, he won't know.
No, but I mean, like, I make the recipe and I forget it. Why should I remember that?
So look at the package. To be clear, though, the milkiness that Dave mentioned for the Spinzall, that's with a K.
As milky as it should be.
It is not milky, I would say. It is more opalescent.
Sometimes it's real milky. I like it better when it's milky. I trust it more.
The chitosan, if it is milky, you need to throw it away. That means that there's mold in it.
Yeah, you'll see like little like freaking, you know what I'm saying?
It'll be like strands of like the mold that you see like grow on top. It's almost like if you are kombucha people, it looks like that.
Yeah, throw it away. Don't use it anymore. Or if it's not, it should be a liquid. It shouldn't be like, it shouldn't
be a hydrocolloid.
Yeah. Okay, now, why these two? One, they work really well.
How do they work really well?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, Don. So these work on a charge basis. So remember what I said with the SPL, it doesn't really matter how much you use. You can use anywhere between about 2 and 4 milliliters per liter of product. So you go a little bit over, if you go a little bit under, it's not going to be that big of a deal. The more acidic something is, or the older your enzyme is, the more you need to add. And sometimes if it's not clarifying, like this lime juice wasn't clarifying so well for me, so I added a little bit more at the last step, again, because I'm a cheater. Right, doesn't matter. With these things, it does matter because you're actually balancing charge with charge. So I never remember which one's positive and which one's negative, but because it doesn't matter, so there's no reason to remember, right? But Kiesel sol has one charge and chitosan has the other. So what happens when you add the Kiesel sol is things like plant particles, protein, other pectin-y things which have a charge on them, right, at the acidity.
Like negative and positive charge, like a magnet charge.
So likes, likes will repel and opposites will charge. So like they'll tend to like kind of agglomerate around the Kiesel sol, which is a suspended silica like sand, suspended silica sol, and they'll form what's called flocks, right? So little like aggregates of bullcrap, right? So when they do that, the particles get bigger, and so the rate at which particles are going to sink, right, is dependent on two things. One, their density, how dense they are relative to the rest of it, and two, how big they are. So the bigger the particles are, the faster and the easier they are going to sink. So the lower power a centrifuge is, the more you want to add a wine finding agent to get those particles bigger and bigger so you can get faster and better separation. Clear?
Kind of.
Okay. So then Kiesel sol is one charge. Then so typically the procedure is I'll add like 2 to 4 milliliters of Pectinex to my product, along with 2 to 4. You can use either. Like Omar, our prep person, jacked everything to 4 without telling me, and I wasn't like, this is bad. And he was like, it's more bulletproof at 4. So we started using 4. The recipes in my book are all 2. It will work with either, but if you're a fan of bulletproofness, go 4, right? The problem with 4 is that with 4, okay, we'll talk about it at the end. Remind me at the end to talk about it. So
what Dave is talking about is adding 4 milliliters of Pectinex, Kiesel sol, or chitosan to a 1 liter amount of whatever was being clarified,
instead of 2.
as opposed to 2 milliliters. So the minimum amount, if you have good Pectinex and you have the good Kiesel sol and chitosan, you should be able to do it with 2 milliliters or 2% of whatever.
0.2.
0.2% of what you're trying to clarify. However, if you want to be bulletproof, if you don't trust your bar staff, if you don't have the most accurate tools, if you're not using a micropipette, you can err on the side of using too much clarifying agents and use 4 instead of 2 and doubling it. That won't change the flavor of what you're doing enough that you're going to notice.
Right.
And it will make it more repeatable, and you're probably not going to have a catastrophic mistake that you then need to come in and fix later.
So you add your Pectinex, your Kiesel sol, you stir them up. That's what I've done here, right? Then about 10, 15, if you're doing 2 milliliters, wait 15. If you're doing 4 milliliters, 10 is enough minutes. You wait. And then you add your chitosan. Same amount. This is important. The amount of enzyme you use is not important, but you do need to balance your Kiesel sol and your chitosan because they're with charges, right? So if you add a lot of one but a little bit of another, the charges don't balance. So when you add the chitosan, what happens is all those big Kiesel sol particles, which are now one charge, will stick now to the chitosan, and now you have even bigger particles, right? Then you wait, so that's 2 to 4, depending on what you do. You wait another 10 or 15 minutes, and you add Kiesel sol again, and they form huge particles, and they separate out very easily. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you're doing twos, let's say we're doing 215, which is what that's what I have in the book. It's all 215s. If you're doing 2 mils, 15 minutes, then you're adding 2 milliliters of Pectinex and 2 of Kiesel sol, that's 4. You're then adding 2 more milliliters of chitosan, that is 6, and then 2 more of Kiesel sol for a total of 8 milliliters per liter, right? So still under 1%. If you do 4, right, and you're only doing 10 minutes, then you're at 1.6. So it's more, right? So like if you
Exactly double.
The other thing, like I said, is that, I made a mistake, I did something wrong, and at the end it wasn't breaking the way I wanted. This is lime juice. It wasn't breaking the way I wanted. So like at the end, you should see a clear break by the end of your procedure. If you don't see a clear break by the end of the procedure, if you don't see clear stuff on top, probably you've done something wrong. Add a little more enzyme. Just add a little more enzyme.
And if it still doesn't work, it means your enzyme is bad.
Yeah. As might have happened in New Orleans.
If anyone has ever been to New Orleans, I don't know.
All right. So this is lime juice. Now, If you let this sit for a long, long time, you could rack off and then let it sit again. When you're racking, that's what you do. You're just waiting until, I could have gone more. You're waiting until you start seeing the first bleebs of nastiness. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Now, this isn't like as clear as it can get. Like I did something wrong. I don't know what it is, and I can't go back and undo it. But lime juice will get water clear. Water clear. But it's super easy to do. You just throw it into a centrifuge. And I need some lime juice for later, so I am going to throw some in the centrifuge and spin it up. And I don't expect it to be water clear, because if the top of the lime juice is not water clear before you spin, it's not going to be water clear afterwards. But the nice thing about spinning lime juice in a centrifuge is your yield is like, it's like 99%. It's like all the yield.
Just so you know what Dave is doing when he's looking inside the rotor as he's pouring, if you pour too much into the rotor, it will spill over the top as if you're running it in continuous mode. So there's like a little shoulder in the rotor. So if you pour it up to there, you're pretty much guaranteed that it's not going to spill over. So that's why he's looking carefully into the rotor as he's pouring it.
All right, so while the lime juice is clarifying, which we need, let's talk about ginger, right? So for many years, ginger was, oh, and by the way, a rotor holds 475 milliliters. And then, so in batch mode, which is 4 minutes per cycle, you can do 475 milliliters. And in continuous, you can do it however fast you want to the clarity level that you desire. Does that make sense?
Until you have more stuff inside than liquid that you can add, at which point you'll see it spray over, and then it's time to clean out your rotor.
You can see a little bit in this puree on the top, but not the best. Okay, now, ginger. So everybody, well, no, a lot of people like ginger.
Very popular.
Very popular flavor. I never work with it because
You hate the penicillin.
that's a great drink. I love the penicillin. I just never made it because we know the person who made it, so why would we make it when you could get it from the person who made it? He's not dead. You know what I mean?
Yet.
We all go eventually. Anyway, so also like I tend to focus on, me personally, I tend to focus on fresh flavors and not kind of cooked flavors. And ginger is extraordinarily complicated. One of the main reasons I thought, which is still true, that ginger can't be clarified very well is because it's got starch in it. And so Pectin-X enzyme will not act on starch. So it's very, very hard to clarify starch. It also, when you cook, so there's compounds in ginger, right? The fresh of ginger, which is what I like, right? When you heat it, it changes. So it can either change to a kind of a mellow cooked ginger flavor or a spicy cooked ginger flavor, depending on like how you heat it and what's in it when it heats. When it just sits for a long time, it tends to go to the more mellow kind of ginger. So dried ginger has one of the spicier. It's called a shell gall. One of the spicier things. So typically, when people want a fresh and a spicy at the same time, they'll like slice it and then they'll cheat and add some dried ginger to it, which gives it a different kind of spiciness, dried ginger spice, which is different. Okay, so it came to my attention that one of our old bartenders, Garrett Richard, was reading something by Darcy O'Neill, who's like a well-known chemist bar person who sells acid phosphate bitters, or at least he used to. Does he still? Wrote a book called Fix the Pumps, which is about soda culture. Go read it, whatever. Anyway, so he had written something about using a product called magnesium carbonate, which I have here somewhere. I don't know where it is, but I have it here somewhere. Called magnesium carbonate to clarify, and Garrett decided to try it on ginger juice and was successful. And so I haven't fully worked out because there's a bunch of different ones. We'll talk about it in a minute. But this stuff allows you to clarify starch. It has other problems we'll get to if we have time. But it turns out that just figuring that out wasn't enough for me to really crack the ginger code. I think I have cracked the ginger code. First of all, this. Don, do you remember the carrot, the horse and carriage that we used to make?
I have nightmares about the horse and carriage.
What was the horse and carriage, Don?
It was a fresh ginger juice cocktail that we tried to...
Carrot apple.
Fresh carrot juice drink that we tried to do. We did it with apple juice and carrot juice. It led to this incredible argument about what kind of carrots to get, the seasonality of carrots, horse carrots, small carrots, baby carrots, sad carrots. Eventually we settled on something that we called a sack carrot. It is a nightmare. And we would, as you would imagine, clarify just the carrot juice and then also clarify apple juice and then mix them back together later.
Because normally you want to do them separately because then you can control everything, right?
Because maybe you want a little bit more carrot juice, maybe you want a little more apple juice. But we had a stable, recipe that we were running. And one day it turned out that our prep guy, Omar, skipped a step without telling us. But we discovered that he'd skipped a step not because it tasted wrong, but it came out crystal clear in a way that we had never been able to achieve before. And what had happened is that he mixed the apple and the carrot together before clarifying it, rather than clarifying it separately as we told him to do. So sometimes you find amazing new techniques by letting people make mistakes.
Yeah, well, and then noticing what was up. So then I did some research. I called the people who make the enzyme. And it turns out, remember I said a little bit ago that too much acid is a problem for the enzyme, right? So in your mind, like in my American mind, right, I'm like, then the best is no acid at all, right? That's kind of like my mentality. Stupid. You know what I mean?
But if you think about it and you're like, okay, where do enzymes normally exist for the digestion of things? So what is the state of your stomach like? There is some acidity. You don't want too much acidity to the point you have acid reflux, but it is some amount of acidity.
Yeah, so I'd say this is like, meh, it's fine. I'll use it. But if I came in and saw that at the bar, I'd be like, yo, Omar, do better next time, man. You know what I mean?
Dave would lose his mind if he came to the bar and saw that this was the clarified lime juice.
Yeah, it should be water clear. It's on me. It's on me, all right? Anyway. Okay, so turns out that the enzyme needs some acid to work. Now, can you think of an ingredient that also contains no acid besides carrot juice that I hadn't thought about for years?
Ginger?
Ginger juice. Ding, ding, ding. Ginger juice does not have enough acid for the enzyme to work. So what we thought was just a starch problem all these years, starch is still a problem, but what we thought was a starch problem was actually a there is no acid problem, is the first major hurdle that you need to get over.
So real quick, while we have this rotor, I'm going to look inside this. If you look inside, this is the shoulder that we were referencing. You want the fill line to be under this shoulder, also under the tops of these fins. So is that line exactly 475 milliliters? It doesn't matter, because you're not going to measure out 475 milliliters and pour it in, because you also have this stuff. Especially if you're running it continuous, there'll be more product in here. All you need to know is that you fill it to the shoulder. So don't worry about what the exact measurement is, just fill it to the shoulder. All right, Dave.
Okay, so I want you to look at this. This is ginger. These two gingers, right? They're slightly different from each other, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But these gingers have had 0.5% of citric acid. So what that means is that for every 100 grams of ginger juice, I've added 1/2 of 1 gram of citric acid, right? And then this was treated the same way these were treated, and yet this one has no break at all. That is unclarifiable straight ginger juice right there. It's actually not straight, it's mixed. All right, this is 100% ginger juice with 0.5% of acid, right? And this is a 50-50 mix of Sky vodka and ginger juice with the 0.5% of acid. You with me? So this is ginger and Sky, no acid. This is ginger, I don't have just, whatever. This is just ginger with acid and the enzymes. And this is ginger, Sky, acid. So this is only half ginger juice, right? Now, here's another thing I realized that was kind of nuts. I'm going to rack this. So this is like racking. So you just, and this is definitely the easiest way to do this, is to get the majority of your stuff by racking. And if I let it sit a little bit longer, I could have gotten more. And now I can just spin and clarify the rest of that, which if we have time, I'll do with magnesium carbonate. This, ginger. Oops, sorry. This is, again, clear enough. I'm going to get it clear when I spin it over there. but this is quite strong. So I'm going to rack also the straight ginger juice, and to me, this is what is interesting. You want it in an Aperol Spritz glass? Isn't everything better out of an Aperol Spritz glass?
Especially Aperol Spritz.
Yeah, they are a good product. All right, I'm only going to rack a little bit because it's hard to rack out of this, but you just need to taste it. Where's the little taster taste?
Straws?
No, the little cup. So this was, and watch it not work. This is just a ginger with no sky, right? And it tastes like ginger, but it's relatively mild, right?
Quite mild.
Quite mild.
Almost sweet.
I mean, it has the stuff, but taste this guy. And remember, that's only half ginger juice.
Wow.
Right.
Whew, that is hot.
Right. This blew my mind like off. Because how is it that the one that is only half ginger juice is spicier than the one that is 100% ginger juice? And the answer is, I think, I don't know, maybe there's a chemist out there, but there's something that is alcohol soluble in the ginger that is spicy, that without the vodka, without the sky in there, it doesn't get pulled into solution, and when you clarify it, it goes away. So I'm guessing that this stuff is like death spice.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And that the clear stuff is not. So also I learned doing this that ginger juice needs to be slightly acidic, but not too acidic, like 0.5% is good, right? To be stable. So if you do it this way, right, in alcohol with 0.5% acid, this is going to be stable at least 4 or 5 days. It's going to be spicy. It's going to slowly lose its spice level, but not. This is already not spicy, and if it didn't have the acid, by tomorrow it would not be spicy anymore.
All right, next experiment. We spin this, remove the liquid, we take the puck, we add the vodka to the puck, and then we spin it again, and we get just the concentrated spice part separate from the water part.
We could do that, probably not today.
Something to try.
Yeah, we could do it. I'm just going to clarify this for you. So this is magnesium carbonate, and I'm just going to guess. It doesn't really matter because magnesium carbonate is not soluble in water. I try to shoot for about 2%, and then you stir it up. This is actually not a standard. It doesn't actually do. It's literally just like a wet blanket. That's how it works. It's pushing stuff to the bottom like a wet blanket. All right. All right. So I can spin that if we have time, which we won't. Let's make some beverages, shall we?
Let's.
Okay. Don, we're gonna need to get everyone in here. I didn't even talk about acids yet. We'll have a minute. All right. Let's make a ginger. Let's make the Sky Mule. Can you get me this out of here? Mm-hmm. And then let's get this. Is this up and running?
Should be.
So we're going to use, here's the recipe I'm giving people. For every 100 milliliters of Sky vodka, and we got to get it cold. When you're carbonating, remember, where's the, hiding. First rule is cold. So what I have there is ice and water. Don't just put on regular ice and water, right, Don? A little bit of salt to get it like real cold. This is,
Freezing point depression.
this is 100 milliliters of Sky, a little bit of salt, 30 milliliters of 1-to-1 simple. Can you unscrew that for me? 181 of water. I'm going to add 20 mils of the good ginger juice. You see my, yeah. I'm actually going to do a little more. I'm going to do 22.5. All right, is it open?
Cheater.
I'm a cheater. We want, oops, I missed some anyway, so I'm going back to 20. All right, and then I need another 3/4 of lime juice.
Sad lime.
Sad lime. It's going to get watered down. It's fine. All right. So since I already pre-chilled this, remember, when you're carbonating, you need the stuff to be both cold, clear, and you also don't want to have the, you don't want to have the, alcohol level too high because alcohol increases the foaminess by a lot. You want to squeeze all of the air out. Air is your complete enemy here because as air comes out of solution when you open it, it is its own nucleation site. And that's why we're going to carbonate 3 times. Notice what I did. I put this in my hand, I brace this here, put down until it goes click. I like to shake always vertical so that stuff doesn't go back into my lines. I use 45 PSI, and you shake it until you stop hearing the gas going to it. That's when you know it's done, right? Then, well, it depends on if you trust your lids, you can unscrew them. But I have a lot of problems with lids, so I tend to vent this way now. And you're looking to vent as fast as possible because you're trying to blast off the gas that was in here, or like any air that's still on, like any particles that you've missed. You want to get rid of those. So this is the first carbonation.
So normally when you're opening something that's carbonated, you'd open it very slowly. You don't want it to bubble up. What's happening here is that the mostly water that you're starting with, as well as the alcohol and everything else we put in here, has dissolved gases. So everything that you see that is liquid has some amount of gas inside it. And if you were to make an ice cube out of it and it's cloudy in the center, that's all the dissolved glass is being pushed to the center of the ice cube, right? If you have people who don't believe you that there is air inside water, what do you think the fish are breathing? Why do they have gills? Why do you need to put an aerator in your aquarium? It's so that you have air in your water. So we are trying to get rid of that air because that air is mostly nitrogen, because the air around us right now is mostly nitrogen. And we want this to be 100% CO2 because we want maximum carbonation. So to get rid of that mostly nitrogen that is in the liquid, because we squeezed out all the air that's in the bottle, what we're doing is opening it as quickly as possible, causing as much bubble as possible to get all of that air that's in there to come out along with the CO2 that we added. We do it multiple times until we're sure that we got rid of most of the not CO2. And by the third, maybe fourth time you do it, we're squeezing out all of the space that's in this
And the
container.
more you do it, whoa, my finger's locked up. The more you do it, the better, but 3's the min. Right?
Yeah, 3 is the minimum. You may need to do it more depending on the size of the bottle and what you're doing. And this is why it is nearly impossible to do this with a keg, because you can't constantly charge and and release and actually get the dissolved gases out of the liquid to begin with.
Please.
So this is tight, because it is completely full of gas now.
You see how that's not clear yet? You want to wait for those bubbles. Just don't open it now. Just wait. Have a little patience. Even though I'm running out of time, have a little patience.
We're just going to let that sit. We're going to let that CO2 settle in. And then when we open it the last time, we'll open it slowly so that we can keep the carbonation inside. Because what's the point of doing all this clarification if you're going to let all the bubbles out in the last second?
Yeah, so I'm going to carbonate this, and we'll talk about it in a minute. Can you use those tweezers to vent this so that we can go fast? Vent that while I carbonate the second one. You also, in the bottles, notice that they're not full. That's not just because I didn't want to make a lot. You need to leave enough space, to see how I'm shaking, to get that surface area in there. You need surface area for the gas to mix with the product, or you're not going to get good carbonation. Oh, it wasn't sharp enough?
So if you imagine, making coffee, the reason why we grind our coffee and we don't just pour water over whole beans, we want to have maximum surface area. If you were to carbonate in whatever bottle that you're using and you just let that sit, the size of the bottle, that part that is air versus not air, that is the area where the CO2 is going into the liquid. Because we want to have maximum place for CO2 to go in, we want to leave a big gap of air in the bottle and then shake it. So all of that liquid that is being turned up inside that bottle as it's being shaken becomes a place for CO2 to go into the liquid. So that's why we squeeze out the air that's here that is not CO2, and then we keep an air gap once we add the CO2 to create space to create that surface area to maximize this. So again, when you're using a keg, a corny keg system to do carbonation, not only can you not get rid of the dissolved gases in the liquid, but you also have a hard time because the surface area of the keg, depending on if you have it sideways or upright, is the only place that the CO2 is going in, which requires you leaving it in your walk-in for multiple days, or you create some kind of agitating machine, put it on a paint shaker, roll it around on the floor with your foot, but you need to create some kind of agitation to create more surface area so that the CO2 will go into it faster.
Yep. All right, so
another quick note, if you notice they're using these metal carburetor caps. Historically, we've used the blue liquid bread caps. The person who makes the liquid bread, the original version that he has a patent for, the ones that are not liquid bread are infringing on his patent. Don't buy those. But also,
I think the patent's over, isn't it?
patent might be over, but don't infringe on other people's patents. Don't also be a patent troll. But the guy who makes the official blue liquid bread caps changed the material. So the material that he used to use created the perfect seal to most soda bottles. Also, a thing to note, if you ever look at a soda cap, this is obviously not a soda cap, but if you look in the bottom of a soda cap and you're trying to do this style of carbonation, there will be either a little plastic sheet on the inside of the cap or there'll be a raised edge. The raised edge version seals by creating the two edges on the either side of the lip of the bottle, and the one that has a plastic film creates a seal by creating like a gasket. The old style liquid bread caps sealed using the two side versions, and that's why you may or may not have had good luck with it. But because he changed the material in making the caps, they now will always leak. So
And they cross thread.
and they cross thread.
You can't get them off.
So it's a problem. You do not want to buy, unless he changes the material, the liquid bread, the blue caps.
Especially because you tend to gorilla strength stuff on when you're not thinking, and then it takes double X gorilla strength to get it off. Look at this. This is ready to open. You see how there's no more stuff rising in it? The top looks placid and ready to go. That is how you want it to be. Now, you want the alcohol level to be roughly low. So in the book, most of my recipes are clocking in at about between 12 and 14% alcohol. I now actually push down lower, closer to like 11, 12. The lower the alcohol level, the less crunked up people will get drinking the stuff, which is kind of better. Like when I first started carbonating, I would carbonate stuff at like 20%. I would take basically cocktail strength, regular cocktail strength, and carbonate it. And people were like, "This is terrific," and they'd be on the floor, like out. You know what I mean? So it's not ideal. But the higher the percentage of alcohol, not only does it get people more drunk, but it's almost impossible to keep bubbles in. High alcohol foams a lot more because it has less surface tension, but also more viscous. So it's like a huge bubble, and the CO2 tends to leave faster out of alcohol than out of not. So you really want to not have the alcohol level be too high. The problem with that is that at a lot of times you simultaneously want to lower the sugar level so that it's not too sweet. And if you get your alcohol level and your sugar level too slow, then you lose the backbone. Are you going to taste or not? I'm okay. You're going to lose the backbone of the drink. And so that's the kind of demo we're going to do next. There's a bunch of different ways you can get around that. But once you are below about 10% alcohol and at the simultaneously below about 8% sugar or so, soda's 10% sugar, 0% alcohol, tastes great. Soda at 5% sugar tastes terrible, right? Unless you've done other things to it. A gin and tonic at 5% sugar tastes good, right? Because it's got alcohol. If you drop both of them too low, it tends to be bad. What do you think?
Absolutely delicious. It tastes great, very clean. All the flavors are there.
I want one more ginger. Oh, hell yeah. Yeah. I wanted a little more ginger. Okay, so I'm going to say a little thing about how to come back from that precipice. So this is Averna. You want to say anything nice about Averna?
Very delicious Amaro from our portfolio.
Yeah.
That one's
Sicily.
Yeah.
Sicily.
So this one says bad. So I'll tell you what I did. This is, so we're gonna, if we have time, which I hope we do in a minute, we're going to talk a little bit about acids, but I use a mixture in this I call champagne acid, which is a mixture of tartaric and lactic acids that don't give a citrus feel, because I don't want this to taste like it's been modified with citrus. I want it to taste not like that, right? But I used a lot of water in this, right? Because a lot of times when you're carbonating Amari, you actually don't want to carbonate it at full, like even at what I would normally say is a good alcohol strength, because when it's carbonated, the bitterness is just going to rocket through it, right? So what I did was I actually did 2.5 times. I did, on the Averna, I did 60 Averna and 150 of water, right? So 2.5 times, a lot. So that is very low, and a 1/4 ounce of the champagne acid, right? That is not good, right? So here's what happened. The alcohol level is now, I think, at roughly 8, and the sugar level is, I think, at roughly like 5 or 6. So it just doesn't have any structure, right? So if you taste this, it's just not gonna be good. Can I try this one?
I've had it last night.
Yeah. Plus, it's not good.
I try to avoid having bad things.
right? It tastes kind of broken, right? It just doesn't have any structure.
I can see that, yeah.
It's just kind of sad.
It is, you can taste the Averna, which is delicious, but
Yeah. So there are various things you can do when you've reduced both the alcohol and the sugar. And we noticed this when we had our non-alcoholic program, is that it was hard for us to get the viscosity, the mouthfeel, the body, and the flavor to come back if you didn't want to use a full 10% of sugar. So there's other ways to do this. Like our good friend Mike at Thunderbolt uses like lactose, which is not sweet, but is sugar. And so he can get the body back up that way. I tend to use, and we use the existing conditions, vegetable glycerin. So it's here somewhere. This is, forget what I used. I used, in this whole thing, I used 10 grams. So I think it's like 2% or less. I try to stay below 2%. And so what the glycerin does, right? So I think glycerin gets a really bad rap because it's used in spirits to kind of hide flaws. In the same way that any of you who've ever distilled know that adding just a small amount of sugar to your distillate makes it taste a lot better. Like such a small amount of sugar that there's no way it's going to affect the finished cocktail, but it really, really, really modifies both the mouthfeel and the taste of the base spirit. And so, you'll see that in rums all the time, and it doesn't really bother me, to be honest. But glycerin gets a bad rap as something that's added to spirits to kind of cheat. But the fact of the matter is that glycerin works in spirits, and it's used to kind of pull the wool over people's eyes. But in cocktails, I think it's a magic ingredient that can bring something back only by adding a little bit. You're not adding a lot, right? And how much better is that?
fantastic. It's more round. All the notes that kind of fell out are back.
Yeah, it's got its backbone back. It's a real drink again. It's kind of, I love it. All right, so what do I have left? Like 10 seconds, 30 seconds? Can I do something quick or not?
No, so we have about 20 minutes left. We're going to take some questions. So
Can I do a
if you
quick
have
one or no?
questions, start asking questions now. We've got a couple questions that I'll ask that came in already. Let's start asking the questions while Dave does one more thing. He still also has to show us how he's going to figure out the magic acid number from before.
We're going to do that.
So
But in the meantime,
you got 5 minutes. Make it quick, Dave.
Okay.
Go.
So lemon juice and lime juice are both 6% acidity, roughly, right? Between 5.8 and 6.5% acidity. Lemon juice is 6% citric acid. Citric acid is like in-out acid, right? Hit it, quit it acid, right? Lime juice is a mixture of citric acid, which is the lemon acid, and malic acid, which is the green apple acid. So I recommend that you buy malic acid and citric acid and have them at your bar and just make little tasters and taste them around. Lime juice, so, apples are almost all the acidity is from malic acid. In lemons, almost all the acidity is from citric acid. Limes, the interesting thing about malic acid, citric acid is a hit it and quit it. Malic acid has a much longer kind of profile. So when you have malic acid, the acid tends to kind of draw out on the palate. So lime is a mixture of 2 parts of citric to 1 part of malic. So you have a very intense it has a very intense kind of acid hit at the beginning, but then also has a nice long tail on it. So that's kind of lime acid. So, things we've been doing for years is figuring out how much acidity, and that's the demo we're going to do in a minute, figuring out how much acidity is in a juice, and then altering that juice up to the acidity of either lemon or lime. The reason being, then now I can use it as like a 3/4 pour in a cocktail and still have enough acidity for my cocktail to balance. Does that make sense?
So to repeat, lemon and lime juice have roughly 6% total acidity. In lemon, that is 6% all citric acid. In lime juice, that is 2 parts citric, 1 part malic. So of the 6, 4% citric, 2% malic, but it is 6 all day.
Right.
So
6 is 6 in 100, by the way. Not like, so a liter takes 60. You with me?
So to 100 milliliters, you're adding 6 grams. So if you want to make something that has the acid burn of a lemon, you would add enough citric acid to bring it up to 6%. So orange juice has roughly 1 point something depending on the orange juice you buy. So by adding 4 point something more citric acid, you're going to get to 6%. Now you have something that tastes like orange juice because, duh, it's orange juice, and it's going to burn like a lemon. So you can use that in a cocktail just like you would use a lemon juice.
All right, now, here's so this is 300 grams of pineapple juice, and 6 grams of malic acid, right? So that's the 2 from the malic acid. And since pineapple juice is roughly, where are you? I wrote it. Pineapple juice is roughly a little over 0.5% acidity on its own. I'm not adding the full 12 of citric. I'm adding 10.4 of citric. And then you stir it to dissolve. There we go.
And the magic words you want to Google when you're trying to figure this out is titratable acidity. So if you put blank juice titratable acidity into Google, you'll get some scientist who's done some kind of experiment, and there'll be a chart with a bunch of different fruit juices and the amount of titratable acidity, which will be usually written in grams per 100 milliliters.
Right. Okay. So, and you have to know which acid you're shooting for when you're doing titratable acidity. But here's the magic. So for years we've been doing this, right? But it turns out when you're, especially lime, not in lemon, but in lime, there's another magic acid. Where is it? This. And you've tasted it before, but taste it. It's nasty. So you can, verify. Nasty.
It tastes like blood.
And shells.
And yeah, it's not good.
Yeah, it's no good. It's not good. Where's the mini? So it turns out that this nasty tasting material is not good on its own, but is absolutely vital to make something taste like real lime. So when I was using, this is acid pineapple. I love acid pineapple. I love acid orange. I love acid pineapple. I love acid grapefruit. So grapefruit we usually take to lemon. Pineapple usually to lime. Orange can go either way depending on the cocktail. Now, we've always, when we've done it, like in a daiquiri, which is only a couple of ingredients, you're always being like, it's missing something, right? It's missing something. It doesn't, so you end up adding a modifier, like an Amaro or a spirit like this. But it turns out that, what's a half times 3? 1.5. It turns out that all that's really missing from the juice is the succinic acid. So you can now, I've convinced Modernist Pantry to carry succinic acid. You're going to use it for a lifetime because you're going to make an 8%, which means 8 grams of succinic acid into 92 grams of water, hot water, because that's the maximum solubility. Do not refrigerate this. Crystals will come off of it. And then you're going to use only 1/2 of a milliliter of that solution for every 100 grams of juice. And it just pops it and makes it like... It just takes it from being not real to all of a sudden being like real. It's crazy. So I'm going to shake a drink that I've done with math. That's how I do drinks, with math. While Don is asking questions, I'm going to make so here's what I did. I took the alcohol, acid, and sugar numbers of a daiquiri, and I plugged it into a computer. I had it do what's called a least squares fit. And what I told it is that I said I want to use 1 ounce of grandma. This is a grandma. I call it Grandma Margarita. I want to use a full ounce of this. I'm going to use an ounce of Espolòn, and then I want you to balance it for me. And the computer did that for me. So we're going to make it.
Very nice.
So as Dave is working on the math and doing this, we had a couple other questions that came in earlier. So. A common question that we often hear is, do water filtration systems, i.e. for camping, work to clarify juices? Yes, but you're not going to have a delicious juice. You're going to have something closer to water that is safe for drinking. So is it clarifying? To some degree, yes. Not 100%, but close enough. It is expensive, it is not practical, and you're going to get a product that doesn't taste good. You're removing flavor. When you are using water filtration systems, the point is to make something that tastes good, and that thing is water. And what does water taste like? It shouldn't taste like anything for the most part. And so you're going to try to remove all impurities. All the things that are in juice, well, those are all impurities. All the things that are in alcohol that taste good, those are all impurities as far as water filtration people are concerned. So can it do it? Technically, yes. Is this the system you would want to use? Definitely not. Do not go with water filtration system to clarify juices.
Yeah, let's go back on that to what we said earlier about like clarification changes flavor. So filtration with activated charcoal, which is what you're talking about, is the most invasive. Another thing I don't like is bentonite. Bentonite is very good. It's a clay. It's very good at clarifying things. Where's the salt? But it's extremely invasive in terms of flavor. It's very flavor damaging. So I tend to try to stay away from things that damage flavor that much. Do you agree?
100%. Okay, when working with high fiber juices such as guanabana or soursop, would you adjust the enzyme higher than regular citrus? Treat it like coconut.
Say it again. Guanabana is hard to clarify. I've never had good. Is that true? I was in Colombia and I clarified guanabana, and it was good. But I've never. I don't work with it a lot because the product up here it just sucks compared to what you get down there. I only made one.
So
is there mixed up? All right. I'm gonna go over here because it's gonna be loud.
Sure. So part of this problem, the way to think about this is it's not the problem necessarily that it is a high fiber juice that is causing the clarification problem. So it could be a lot of different things. So in the example of clarifying something like a ginger juice, the problem was starch, right? In the case of fibers are really not going to be the thing that prevent you from clarifying. If anything, higher fiber should mean that it has less pectin and less other things that are keeping things in solution. Fiber is something that's going to drop out anyways. Fibers are large, indigestible, like large things that are going to clarify, going to be able to spin out. So it's not really something I would worry about from an enzyme perspective. In terms of when you're playing with any product and you're not sure what to do, obviously, if you want to try as low as possible, start with the 0.2%, 0.02%, so 2 milliliters per liter. But then you can go up to 4, as we suggest, if you want to make sure that it's bulletproof. And then again, double once more if it's still not breaking. After that point, it's probably not going to break if your enzyme is good. So if you've gotten to the point where you're at 8 and it's still not breaking, it's probably not a pectin problem. And it could be many other things that is not pectin. Keep in mind, pectin X only cuts pectin. So if there's other things, it will not get cut. So for example, when we're talking about other enzymes that you may have heard of or that you're familiar with in the spirits world, usually we're talking about things like starches. So starches are complex sugars, and we need to break down starch into sugar so that we can then have yeast digest it, and then it becomes alcohol. So when you take something like corn or other grains and you want to turn it into alcohol, you have to use a different enzyme. That enzyme is called amylase. So there are many different enzymes out there, and depending on what you're breaking down, you'll need the correct enzyme for it. For most juices that we use behind the bar, in the US at least, it tends to be the thing that prevents clarification is pectin. So we are using the pectin X enzyme. And so when it comes to something like guanabana or a soursop, it may depend on if you're getting a fresh juice or if you're getting a pasteurized juice or if you're using a canned juice. Those will all be very different, or if you're using a puree for that matter. So depending on what chemical processing or heat processing went into that product, it will completely change the characteristics of the product you're working with. So you really need to look at exactly what you're working with and then figure out what is preventing the clarification. It may be pectin, it may not be pectin. So really look at what juice you're working with. Another question that came in was, does clarification or milk washing change ABV? And the answer is yes. It obviously will change ABV. Just putting straight alcohol into the centrifuge and taking it out will change the ABV because you're going to lose something to evaporation. You know, think of it as like an angel share. You're always changing ABV. The question is it a change in ABV that actually makes a difference to you? Is that something that is going to matter from a making a delicious drink perspective? But if you're talking about pure numbers, yes, it will make a difference. And then the question is, how can you measure that? And that is a complicated question. There is a product that Dave will talk about in a second, but for the most part, unless you're willing to spend a couple $100s to buy more equipment, about $400, you cannot measure this with things that you already probably own. Most of us probably own a refractometer, and you'll use that to measure bricks and sugar. You cannot use a refractometer, despite what every frozen drink machine repair person will tell you. You cannot use a refractometer to measure the ABV in a product.
But you can't measure the ABV. You can use a refractometer if you're trying to hit the same target all the time, as long as everything else is the same, but it's not telling you any information that you can use in the future.
Usually, if something is wrong, let's say in a frozen drink mix, there are multiple things that could be wrong. If you are absolutely certain that there's only one thing wrong, then you can use a refractometer to try to troubleshoot it. But you cannot measure both sugar and alcohol at the same time. So the tool that you could use to do this would be
You need an easy dens from the Anton Park Corporation. You need to give them the extra money to have the accurate readings out of it because they're those kind of people. And then you need to pay another person to buy a program called AlcoDens LQ, $300 that can actually, but I use the trial version. You can download the trial version on as many computers as you like. And you plug in the hydrometer number, the electronic one, because it only requires 10 or 15 milliliters, and the refractometer number along with both temperatures, and it'll spit out the numbers very accurately. I've tested it.
So you're looking at a density reading, a refractometer reading, a temperature reading. It takes quite a bit to do this. And then complex math, so complex that Dave couldn't even program it himself. He had to pay someone who already did the work to do this.
The reason it sucks is because like sugar and alcohol change density differently as temperature changes. And alcohol and water aren't linear when they're added to each other in terms of their expansion and contraction. And furthermore, the refractive index of ethanol mixtures is not linear either. So none of these things are linear. So what you need is just a whole bunch of data. So this dude had all the data and then made a program that could then extrapolate the numbers out of it because he's worked in like industrial distilling forever. You know?
So meaning that if you imagine a chart, so if you have a X, Y axis and a line, if you are in one place on X, you are in one place on Y. If that is like a parabola, for every X, you could be in two different places. So you can't tell exactly where you are. So we are going back to the original experiment. For those of you who missed this in the beginning, the question was, can you measure acidity easily at a bar using things you probably already own? So we are using a gram scale that goes down to 2 decimal points. So the most accurate scale you can get, this will probably only cost you about $9 on Amazon. And what we did was we measured the weight of the entire stack of things here. So it is a pint container, a cup container, a lid, and a stir stick. There was a measured amount of baking soda on top and a measured amount of mystery acid. The mystery acid was citric acid that I added to water. Dave does not know what the amount of acidity is in this liquid. We added the baking soda to the acid, stirred it, and we let it sit for the 2 hours during this presentation. And now the CO2 that has resulted from this.
We have lost, so here's what you need to know. We have lost, let's see if I got the same number again, 196.3433. We have lost 0.86 grams, right? So that's CO2. So that's those CO2 molecules were formed every time one of the acids undid its biznag, right? So you're gonna do this math for me, all right? Where's how much do this? Okay, ready? Okay, 0.86 times 145.5. That's my magic number for citric. You got that? Mm-hmm. Divide that by 116.96.
1.069.
Am I off? Look, I've done this a billion times. I could have made a mistake, not added enough baking soda, but...
Slightly off, but pretty close.
What was the actual number?
It was 1.2.
So I'm within 0.14%, I'm within 0.14%, okay? And if you have a milligram scale, oh yeah, right? It gives you a whole extra digit. You know what I'm saying? Anyways, not bad, right? Not bad for something you can do with an $8 piece of equipment and just have sitting around. The key is just make sure that you keep everything always the same. All right, any more questions? Because I'm done doing demos.
So to explain what this was, that the acid and the baking soda, it basically does the same thing that you do when you make a volcano, experiment when you're in elementary school. So acid plus base equals CO2. CO2 leaves. We weigh the amount of CO2 that we lost, and from that we can calculate based on the weight of the acid how much acid there should have been.
Yes. So, and it's complicated. I have the numbers. If anyone's actually writing this down, so you multiply the number of grams of CO2, the number of grams you've lost, right? For citric acid, you multiply that by 145.5. For malic acid, you multiply it by 152.3. And for tartaric acid, you multiply it by 170.5. So you need to think, look, malic and citric are close to each other. For something like lemon that's mainly malic and citric, you're fine, right? Tartaric acid is a little different, but they're all in the ballpark. So you choose whatever is the major acid and you use that number, right? If you know the ratio, then you can kind of cheat it in between. So you multiply the number of grams lost by that magic number and then divide it by how many grams of product you started with, and that's your percentage. Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
And you know what? I use the computer to figure it out. Anyway,
We'll try to get those numbers together for everyone afterwards so that this will be available on the Campari Academy website after tomorrow.
going back to computers for a minute, and like what Don said about does a milliliter make a difference? I've been doing a lot of studies recently on sugar levels and the initial ABV of a drink versus and it turns out that the less diluted drink is, kind of the less sugar you want in it. So in a shaken spec, a couple of milliliters one way or the other can make a difference. So when I told the computer, make this this pineapple graham margarita like a daiquiri, right? And so it wasn't able to get the ABV low enough. It told me to add water to the spec, but I didn't add water to the spec to get it to the daiquiri spec. So when I shook it, it was a little too sweet. So my initial recipe was, remember, pineapple juice has a lot more sugar in it. It's like 11% sugar. It has a lot more sugar than lime juice does. Don't try to measure the sugar level of your lime juice with a refractometer because there's so much acid in it, it's going to throw off the numbers. Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you understand what I'm saying? Don't. I have the calibrations. Just text me. I have the calibrations for your, I do. Please. Anyway. So it's 3/4 of an ounce of the acid-adjusted pineapple, which gives you the right amount of acid, right? Then it's, get this, 1 ounce of Grand Marnier, right? Regular, not the whatever, Louis, whatever, blah, 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 not the blue stuff, regular. By the way, Grand Marnier, less sweet than you think it is. Less sweet than Cointreau.
It smells like it should be sweeter because it's with cognac.
Is not. Yeah, is lower in sweetness. So 1 ounce of Grandma, 1 ounce of Espolòn, 3/4 of an ounce of that. Now, the computer, to hit the exact same amount of alcohol, sugar, and acid as a daiquiri, told me to add 1/4 ounce of simple syrup to that. But it also said to add 1/4 ounce of water to it. And I didn't do that. So it turned out a little bit
alcohol forward.
too sweet.
Too sweet.
I thought it was too sweet.
Oh.
So we made another, whatever, but yeah, it's the same kind of thing. So we made another one with just a bar spoon of simple, same spec, right? So it was 3/4 acid pineapple with the succinate, come on, 'cause please. 1 ounce of Espolòn, 1 ounce of Grandma, and then a bar spoon, and I think it's delightful.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well balanced.
Computers, math.
So, to explain what just happened, most of us, when we make drinks, we do it kind of intuitively. What we're doing is we take a recipe we already know and we start plugging other things into it. So you're like, okay, daiquiri, 2 3/4, 3/4. I take the lemon, I substitute lime or something like it. You know, I take the rum, I put bourbon. You know, you're mixing things in and you're playing this Mr. Potato Head game. What Dave is doing is he's doing it by the precise actual math of the acid and the alcohol and the acidity of every spirit and every ingredient that goes into a cocktail. So in this case, it seems easy because he's making something like a daiquiri, or a margarita, but he could just as easily do this with something like a Negroni or a Manhattan just by plugging in the numbers. All this actually is explained in his first book. It's the chart that has all the little circles with the rings that are shaded in and colored on the outer edge. This is the page that I think most people did not pay enough attention to in his book. If you have his book, go back and look for this chart. We'll mention it again on the Academy website after today, so you can go back and look for it. So
I'm just 10 years better at it now, and I've actually measured all of the spirits now, as opposed to just guessing.
All right, so we got some questions coming in, I believe. Yes? Okay. Nope. Oh, no questions.
What?
If there are any questions later, please continue to ask them. We'll try to get to them later. We're doing another session in a couple of weeks in New York. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can.
Did any of this make any sense?
Hopefully.
Oh, it definitely made sense.
All right.
I just wanted to say thank you one more time to Dave and Don. And I wanted to let everyone know, thank you for following along. If you look in the Q&A, there's a button on there to register for our newsletter, which we'll follow up with cheat sheets and more information. And next month, we are doing another digital session on clarified milk punches. See you then.
He's Don Burt if you want to hit him up. I'm Cooking Issues if you want to ask questions, because we feel it's our obligation to give people the information to be better at what they want. Correct.
All right. Thank you.